Hi, my name is Frank Schaeffer. I come from an evangelical background. In fact, my father, Francis Schaeffer, who died in 1984, became a leader, maybe the leader of the early stages of the religious right that morphed into the Republican Party, or rather took it over. You can trace a direct line from what we did in the 1970s and 80s, helping foment the anti-abortion movement with the movie Whatever Happened to the Human Race, featuring my father and Dr. Sierra Koop, who became Ronald Reagan Surgeon General, and the storming of the Capitol. Normally, when I make these little commentaries on video, I speak extemporaneously and don't use notes. But today, I want to choose my words very carefully because this is an intensely serious subject I'm going to address. So I have written something out, and I want to read this to you. So please be patient as I do this. Thank you. At Evangelical CPAC this year, the speech I found most chilling came from Michael Knowles, a right-wing political commentator for the Daily Wire, who declared that for the good of society, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. This is a call for mass murder. The Unhinged focused on transgender rights at CPAC this year. Every speaker raised it, proves hating trans people will now be an animating issue in the coming presidential election in the way the anti-abortion grandstanding that we Schaeffers had so much to do with in the 70s and 80s used to be. The violent right has now just found its newest victims to turn into an anger machine with which to stir up its troops. The vitriolic rhetoric on display at CPAC was reflective of the hostile movement by MAGA leaders seeking to destroy the lives of transgender Americans for political advantage. The leaders of this hate movement are evangelical Christian nationalists. There will be lynchings, and those lynchings will have been inspired by evangelicals claiming to follow Christ. You can bet on that. Violence always follows violent rhetoric. Evangelical MAGA leaders have the blood of the innocent on their hands. Already a growing number of even elected officials face harassment and death threats from MAGA, causing many to leave politics. We saw that with the election officials who stood up against Trump, even Republicans who stood up against his lie that the election had been stolen. By nearly every measure, political violence is seen as more acceptable today than it was even 5 years ago. So far this year, anti-trans legislation has been proposed in 39 states, the majority of the United States. There will be killings of trans people next. Violent talk always results in violent actions. We've seen that through the creeping anti-Semitism into the Republican movement, the talk about George Soros and others, and then all of a sudden someone is shooting up a synagogue. And that has been the pattern. Until recently, most legislation banning transgender health care was aimed at minors, but Republicans are increasingly pushing proposals that would limit treatments for adults as well. Then what? Open violence and killing of trans by MAGA fanatics is next. You can bet on it. Toxic rhetoric and political actions can have profound consequences for the LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender youth, for whom suicide rates are high. That is only the start. Harassment, intimidation, and violence against LGBTQ Americans is rising, fueled by a rise in online hate speech by GOP anti-LGBTQ legislation and activists. Hundreds of transgender people have been killed already over the past decades in targeted shootings, with Black trans especially high on the list. Republican politicians and party leaders see the issue of trans rights as a way to rile their base. So do evangelical leaders, always looking for a way to raise funds. I know we used to do this with our pro-life advocacy, and we were lying then, and they are lying now. It is a strategy that seeks to capitalize on the Christian Nationalist, quote, parental rights movement today, much in the way we capitalized on the pro-life movement of the past. GOP leaders know this, evangelical leaders know this, and they also know that their lies will lead to the murder of trans people. Evangelical and MAGA and GOP leaders do not care. My name is Frank Schaeffer.